So I'm going to do my mini open as the judge instructed. This case is Atlas Ferrera versus Terminix. And in May of 2015, Atlas Ferrera was working at Larchmont Beauty Supply, where he worked as customer service there. Next door, immediately next door to that, was a Starbucks, and they shared a wall. The Starbucks had been closed by the city and county of Los Angeles because of a roach infestation. And Terminix had been called to provide remediation of the pests, the bugs. While Mr. Ferrera was closing up the shop at 7 p.m., employees of Terminix had begun spraying chemicals called pyrethrins and pyrethroids and something called alpine dust, which is a pesticide, and something called diatomaceous earth. As they were pumping the chemicals into the wall space between the shared walls, Mr. Ferrera was sitting in the bathroom adjacent to that wall. And he was sitting in the bathroom. So he couldn't get out of there real quick when it started filling with smoke. So much smoke that they thought there was a fire next door. He immediately began choking and coughing, blood coming out of his nose, and he went to the hospital. Within days, he found out he had lost his entire sense of smell and taste. And it's not come back. It's permanent. The defense, Terminix in this case, denies that it happened and that it could have happened and that they did anything wrong. At the end of this case, a verdict will support an award of $15 million or more. We look forward to presenting the case to you. Your Honor, may I now begin with jury selection?
You may.
Okay. So you are our potential jurors, and thank you for sticking around. We've got this thing in the news right now called COVID. It's February of 2019 while we're presenting this case. So we appreciate everybody being here. And so you heard about what this case is about. And I need to talk to you and get to know you real well. We're going to do about 10 minutes of voir dire right now. So from anything that you heard, does anybody have any immediate feelings about what they've heard about this case and whether they can or cannot be here? Yes, sir.
Yeah, you said that the defense is denying that it happened.
Correct.
You said like that, I don't get.
Yeah. So at this point, during this part of the selection, I can't talk to you about the facts of the case. I can just tell you that their defense in this case, one of them, is that didn't happen.
Meaning he wasn't in the bathroom?
I can't get into the facts of the case. The judge will allow me to talk more later if you get selected in this. But that's all I can say at this point.
So the $15 million, where do you get that from?
Where do I get the number from?
Yeah, just that it being like a huge number if they're saying it didn't happen. It just,
Huge number in a good way or huge number in a bad way?
well, just that's a lot of money. I think that's a lot of money to all of us.
It is a lot of money. I agree. Who thinks it's a lot of money?
Right.
So we get to present the case to you, both sides, and at the end of the case, it's our position that at least $15 million would be, and we're going to give you tools. I promise at the end of this case we get to give you tools about that. But this is a case about someone's loss of two of their senses, smell and taste. So does anybody have any, where are you from? Los Angeles, okay. And you grew up here? Great. What's your background, like your family and stuff like that?
I'm an accountant.
Oh, cool.
And my whole family's accountants, so kind of family business.
Oh, great. And what'd you have for lunch today?
I had Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A. The pickles, the mayo, the spicy. Makes my mouth water just thinking about it.
Mine too.
Is that your go-to kind of fast food?
It's my cheat day.
It's your cheat day. So when you want to treat yourself, you want to have a cheat, That's the flavor that you like. Okay. You remember your first Chick-fil-A? Okay. It was a late night kind of like after partying or something like that? Sure. Yeah. So when you take a bite of that Chick-fil-A, does it take you back? Sure. Cool. Ma'am, how did you feel about some of the stuff we talked about?
Well, the thing that hit me hardest was the $15 million. I'm not really sure what that's based on.
Well, we get to present both sides of the case to you, and at the end of the case, you get to, along with the other jurors, make a decision about the value, the harms, and losses in this case. This is a case about general damages only. A judge is going to instruct you. We're not asking for lost wages or medical bills. This is just an appraisal, like an accountant would do, of harms and losses. And so, have you made up your mind already, one way or the other, about whether you can be a fair and impartial juror?
Well, I'm a fair person. I just would like to see more evidence, and you're telling me I can't yet, but I would reserve judgment until I see the evidence.
Did everybody hear what she just said? She's going to reserve judgment until she's heard the evidence. That's like the perfect juror response. That's what all we can ask you to do is to reserve judgment, like don't make up your mind. Have you made up your mind one way or the other?
I haven't made up my mind, but I do have some opinions.
What are your opinions?
Well, that $15 million is a lot for somebody who's got an invisible injury.
Okay, sure. So let me ask you this. If I was walking with dark glasses and a cane, like this, what presumption could you make about me?
That you were seeing impaired?
Okay. And if you saw me to somebody, what presumption could you make about that?
That you had a hearing impairment?
Okay. What about somebody who has no smell and taste? Could you tell?
No,
How about this guy? Can you tell if he can smell or taste?
of course not.
How about this fine lady over here?
No.
So one, you said, is an invisible injury. The other ones are kind of visible, right? A seeing impaired person, they have some tells. I mean, they need to be helped. Or they have tools that allow them to get around. Or a person who's hearing impaired could have a cochlear implant or hearing aids. A person that has no sense of smell and taste looks just like my client. Perfectly normal looking, right?
Right.
Will you wait until you've heard all the evidence before making a determination about an invisible injury?
Yes, and I said that I would. I still have opinions that it's not the same kind of injury as an impairment that interrupts your ability to move around in the world. Like
I agree. And if we were here on a person who, let's say, lost complete sight, we'd be asking minimum $30 million. I agree with you. Anybody feel that sight out of the senses is probably the most important to lose? Okay, sir, why do you feel that way?
We live in a dangerous world. It's a million times more dangerous when you can't see it.
It allows you to sense danger, appreciate beauty,
Exactly.
right? How about your sense of smell?
I would say that's third place on my total poll.
Okay, third. What's number two? Sorry?
Here. I see what you did there.
Yeah. It's not just smell, it's also taste.
They're linked.
Where are you from?
Southern California.
And what's your background? I'm Middle Eastern.
I'm Vietnamese.
Vietnamese, okay. Banh mi,
Yes.
pho,
Yep.
spicy,
All those are good.
tangy,
Yep.
vinegary.
Yep.
That Vietnamese coffee is my favorite.
Yep.
Gets you going.
Yeah, it'll keep you up till the very end.
Yeah. So when you have holidays, what's your holidays based around as far as what brings everybody together usually?
With family, of course.
Yeah.
There's the Lunar New Year.
And what do you do when you have those celebrations? What's common about all those celebrations? Eat and drink. Mom, who's the cook? Mom, dad?
Yes.
Special recipes?
Yeah, her pho is pretty amazing. My aunt's also make lobster as well.
Okay. And when you come to the house and you first experience those smells,
Yeah, the smell of the broth of my mom's pho.
what does it remind you of?
Childhood and great memories.
Great. Okay. Will you wait until you've heard all the evidence?
Yeah, sure.
Have you made an opinion about Mr. Ferrera here? Does he look normal to you?
It would appear so.
Does he look like he has any disability?
Can't really tell you until I hear the evidence.
Okay, that's great. That's all we're asking you to do, because the defendant's entitled to that same thing. You heard what I said, and remember, what lawyers say is not evidence. But this defense attorney says not evidence. What I say, you can't trust what I say. You can't until you've heard the evidence. And that's all I'm asking you to wait for. You gentlemen over here, how do you feel about any of the things we talked about?
I just wonder, how can you prove that? You know, like, what if someone is lying? Not to say that your client is
Yeah.
a liar.
Well, let me ask you
You're not
this.
asking for $15
Yeah.
million.
You're going to hear from witnesses in the case. You're going to hear from physicians. You heard the list of names that were read. You're going to hear from people in his life. You're going to hear from the defense experts in the case. If you are selected on this jury, and I don't prove our case beyond a preponderance of the evidence by what we have to prove, do you promise, if we don't prove it, you'll give him 0?
I don't know if I can make that promise. Maybe there's some sympathy.
We don't want your sympathy. We can't. I'm not saying you can't have sympathy, but you can't let your sympathy drive your verdict. So what I'm asking you is just to wait and give us a fair shot. Because if you've made up your mind about any of the things in this case, you can't be fair to either side. Right? That's all we're asking. Where are you from? West Covina. And I notice your last name, I think it's Persian.
Yeah.
Gormazabzi, Fesenjun, sweet and savory. Kashke Badamjun, eggplant with tomatoes. Saffron, Shireen. Your Nowruz. The 7 words with S, they're all based on what? Taste, food. The things that happen in the spring, when your senses come alive after the winter. How important is that to your family, to your culture?
It's one of the few things every year that we look for.
When Mama Bozorg and Papa Bozorg bring you to the table and you have that first bite of kubide, what does it make you feel like? Anybody here know anyone that has lost their smell and taste? Remember, we're living in the world 2 weeks before COVID. Okay. Okay. So, in the world we're living in right now, has anyone ever heard of somebody, it's called anosmia, losing their sense of smell? You, sir, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, you said the world now?
The world that we lived in at 2019 when I'm 2020 when I'm presenting this case. Yes, sir.
Yes, I have a friend.
Okay, and your friend lost what?
Sense of smell.
Only smell. Was still able to taste.
Yes, it tasted about
Okay. And how did that impact his life?
certainly, it's difficult to balance the smell. Taste food does impact it somewhat. And there were issues with regards to basic safety issues. Because they have a fire in the house.
Like this gentleman over here said, there's a lot of dangers in the world. You don't have your sight. You can't see a lot of it. But your sense of smell is an alarm system as well. That's why natural gas, they put an additive to it so you can smell it. Right? Okay. So that's just a little sample of a voir dire that we had in this case. With a lot of $15 million sticker shock. And so, but what I was doing with that was just trying to connect everyone and their food and their memories and their taking you back, because this case is about smell and taste, which are really memories. Do you remember the taste exactly of your chicken sandwich? You can kind of remember it, but it's not until you actually taste it that that memory is triggered. And so we're setting the table, for lack of a better term, to precondition these jurors, because later, yes?
I have a quick question. Where did the case take place?
In LA.
So I'm guessing the jury was very diverse. Did you do a lot of...
I had Persian, I had Brazilian, I was talking about feijoada, I had a Jewish guy and his matzo ball soup, I had a Korean guy who was talking about his bibimbap, and I'm a foodie. So for me, and every day I wore socks of food. And I made sure to, pull them up, and I had, hamburgers and pizza socks and lemons, and I know the jury was watching. I'm pulling up my socks every day. And actually, when a juror was dismissed, they said, nice socks. And so we're sending these messages to them. I know Alex is here, and Rex. You guys are really big on imagery and NLP and sending these, messages. You're programming your jurors. So even my bad jurors, I'm getting them to give me concessions about how important food is, how important memories are, and getting them, how could I live without those? Because it's really everything. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chance Pardon, who tried this case with me. And we got it really 2 weeks before the trial. We knew nothing about the case, and we got it 2 weeks before, and our guy wasn't just a regular guy. He was a super smeller. And you'll learn about that from Chance. I'm gonna hand the mic over to you. Here you go, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we're gonna break down the open, and then when we get back after the break, I'm gonna do my closing. In our closing, we did something very unique that I took a big risk with doing, and it worked. It paid off. So Chance, when you're ready. I didn't get any applause when I said it. For Chance. All right.
Yeah, see?
All right.
Can you hear? Good. All right. Get it off the stage. Afternoon. You've all made it through the least interesting part of the trial, jury selection. And now you're going to have the opportunity to get a roadmap to what we believe this case is about. But I want each of you to remember, as you're listening to both openings, what the attorneys say is not evidence. What I tell you is not evidence. You haven't heard any evidence yet. You haven't seen any evidence yet. So make sure you're listening closely to both sides, but remember, this isn't evidence. You've met our client, Atlas Ferrera. He's the oldest of 3 children, grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, to single mother. And you'll learn as this trial goes on that family unit, especially with his grandmother, was so important to him growing up, and now. You'll learn that he didn't just have the struggles of growing up in a single-parent household. He actually had the unique privilege of being partially raised by his grandmother. And you'll learn that his grandmother wasn't just any old grandmother. She had quite the backstory. She was a vaudevillian, went around the world performing. And as she did these performances, she learned a valuable skill, a culinary skill. And she brought that home to Atlas and his siblings. You'll learn that she was a cordon bleu change chef, and part of the way Atlas and all of his siblings connected with her and the rest of the family was through cuisine. You'll hear how important Thanksgiving was, how important Christmas was. And you'll hear from experts in this case, and you'll learn that your sense of taste and smell is really inextricably connected to memory. You've heard from some of your fellow jurors, family events, the memories that arise from smelling a dish that their mom might make, smelling a dish their grandmother might make, or grandpa, or father, or siblings, and what that means to them. And you'll learn what that means or meant to Mr. Ferrera. And Atlas was someone, I think it's rare these days, who's gifted with knowing who he is and who he wanted to be. As soon as he was able, as soon as he turned 18, he left home and he wanted to get into the fashion industry. So he moves to New York, he's a model. But his ultimate goal is more than that. He works his way up, he becomes a manager of other models. He decides to move to LA. And you'll learn from one of his coworkers and business partners that Atlas had a gift. Some people in artistry, we think of, they're gifted with painting or photography. Atlas was different. He was gifted in scent. That he worked his way up within the fashion industry, within the high-end department stores, managing the scent departments. He's the one that you saw when you came in. Hey, I don't know what to get my wife this year for Christmas. Can you give me some suggestions on scents? He would be the one that knew. Encyclopedic memory of scent. And you learn about how taste connected to each of those memories. You'll learn a lot about how when Atlas was first a young man in the fashion industry as a model, he had the privilege of spending a lot of time in Italy. And he got to experience that cuisine and learn it, and he brought it back home. And you'll learn that Atlas was on the cusp of reaching what he ultimately wanted to do in his life, starting his own fragrance business. And you'll learn that he had even found a chemist. He had selected, I believe, 6 out of the 8 scents they wanted to start with, and they were ready to start producing them. And that was taken away from him. May 1st, 2015, and if we could get Exhibit 1 up on the screen, please.
CJ, you might want to go over
Yep.
there and get it back. There we go.
There we go.
Excellent.
And this always happens during trial. Technical difficulties. So you'll learn that even though Atlas was on the cusp of starting his own business, I know many of us these days have that dream, he still had to work. And he was an employee at Larchmont Beauty Center, as we see up on the screen. Right over here. And this is in the Larchmont area of Los Angeles. Some of us may have been there before, a strip of shops. And at Larchmont Beauty, he was the owner's right-hand man. He was the one that would direct the customers to the scents they may want, the products that they may like. And that afternoon, he was working the PM shift, Larchmont Beauty Supplies, and we see that this facade of stores, we share a wall with the Starbucks next door. And what Atlas didn't know that day is that this Starbucks had been shut down by the health department because it had a roach infestation. Health department came, inspected, saw they had roaches, other signs of infestation, said, hey, you guys got to get this taken care of. So they contacted Terminix. Terminix comes by earlier in the day, And I'll show you each of the pesticides and chemicals that were applied. And they start their pesticide treatment. Later that afternoon, they come by again, around 6:37 at night. Mr. Ferrera was in probably one of the most vulnerable places you could be in. If we could get Exhibit 27, please.
And while they're looking for that, I want to take just a moment just to break down what Chance is doing here. So before anybody watch the movie Up, okay? What's the movie Up about?
It's about a man who has a dream of flying and a dream of family. And he brings those two dreams together.
Really? Is that what it's about? That's what we think it's about, and that's what most people say. But the first 5 minutes or more, actually, of Up is just a slideshow of his love affair with his wife. And what happens to her? She dies. Why did they do that in that movie? So you care about the old man. Otherwise, you don't care about him. He's just a grumpy old man. So what Chance did was he told the picture album of Atlas and what was taken from him before we start getting to the evildoer Terminix. Because now you care. Now you're like, holy shit, this guy, we know he lost his smell and taste, but we didn't know his grandmother was from, you know, the cordon bleu. You might want to help
Yeah.
him out. Damn. So that's why CJ chose to do that order
Yes.
instead of starting with what the defendant did. It was really important that we made sure that they cared
That's the one.
about him before you heard about how they did it. Yes, sir.
Interesting, because that's what I was thinking myself in the sequencing of it. But do you really think that they cared and that they were ready to care and trust you at that point?
Well, in my voir dire, I was really connecting with every juror about family and food and traditions and home and mom and what mom smells like and what your new baby smells like, right? To get them ready for this.
Yeah, jury selection isn't separate from the opening. What we did here is we tried to really connect everything that was coming up during jury selection, the themes we were raising, family, taste, smell as a memory, and putting that into the opening. So we tried to make it flow through so those weren't separate, distinct events in the trial.
Aria.
So was this a case-specific sequence, or is this a sequence that you like?
You know, I think we favor this.
Yeah.
Sometimes we've done it the other way, where we start with the defendant, like what the defendant start that day and how they changed this person's life. But in this case, we needed them to care desperately about this invisible injury. That people are like, are they even buying this shit? You can't prove loss of smell. Can't be proven. There's no objective test to prove someone lost their smell. It's a believability contest. And if they're not on board early with this idea, we lost them. So that's why we really had to get them to care. And when I was reading my voir dire on the plane right here, I'm like, man, it was a very tough, skeptical jury. You guys, times 100 of what I was getting from here. Yeah.
The jurors that you got to care about your client, were those the jurors that you wanted, or did they include some bad jurors?
Well, one of them was a wife of a husband that had a family business of pesticides.